It's almost like the devil has possessed Israel to the point where they're just doing things that make no logical sense. It doesn't make sense to remove Bashar al-Assad and then enable a much more dangerous country to fill in the power vacuum, and that dangerous country is Turkey. So if the Islamists get enough power in Jordan, they can do a coup in Jordan and overthrow the king. That would mean there being literally no buffer zone between Iraq and Israel, and that would enable Iran to just enter Iraq and from Iraq go right to Israel. And I want to show you guys this quote from this journalist, Mr. Friedman, Thomas Friedman. This guy did an interview recently with the New York Times. All right. If the U.S. removed its troops we have in eastern Syria, they're put there to prevent ISIS from returning, and just walked away, you'll have a free-for-all. Because what did Trump say when he was asked about the 900 soldiers in Syria? He said, well, Turkey has a big enough army. He said, Turkey's got a massive army. So Mr. Friedman said recently, if the U.S. removed its troops we have in eastern Syria, they're put there to prevent ISIS from returning, and just walked away, you'll have a free-for-all. It'll be Turkey versus Kurds. It'll be Syrians versus Syrians. Israel will move in. It'll be a complete vacuum. The most immediate impact will be on the European Union because you'll get a huge outflow of refugees and you'll have a failed state right in the heart of the Middle East. That will be an immediate threat to Jordan, which is a vital U.S. ally. And if Jordan in any way collapses, then you have no buffer zone between Israel and Iraq. And you're off to a Middle East that will very quickly, like a wildfire, be engulfed in instability. Here's Jordan, borders with Syria and Iraq. If Syria gets overran by Islamists, which it already has, but let's say it gets seriously overran, they could overflow into Jordan. They could do a coup against the king. The thing is that King Abdullah has been an ally of Israel. And so the Islamists hate King Abdullah. So if the Islamists get enough power in Jordan, they can do a coup in Jordan and overthrow the king. That would mean exactly what Friedman was warning about, there being literally no buffer zone between Iraq and Israel, because Jordan would be taken over. And that would enable Iran to just enter Iraq and from Iraq go right to Israel, because there would be no buffer zone. Because right now, King Abdullah is, like I said, he's an ally of Israel. And when the Iranians were hitting Israel with that barrage of missiles, the Jordanians were helping the Israelis. And so the Islamists hate the Jordanians for this. They hate the Jordanians because of the fact that the Jordanians are friendly with the Israelis. And the Jordanians are a part of Israel's external security. So if the Islamists take over Jordan and they overthrow King Abdullah, or let's say if Turkey takes over Jordan, or if Turkey organizes and orchestrates a coup to overthrow the king, and then installs a puppet government in Jordan that would be a proxy of Turkey, that would mean exactly what Mr. Friedman has warned about. No buffer zone between Iraq and Jordan, thus enabling really Iranian forces and Turkish forces to go right through Mesopotamia into Israel. So Iran could just enter Iraq, from Iraq into Jordan, right into Israel. Turkey could go from Syria right into Israel from Syria. And it already controls Syria. So really, what we are seeing with this this new era is really the dismantling of Israel's security, external security. It's very scary. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that this doesn't make me nervous. It does. It really does. Syria has been the source of much strife between Washington and Ankara over the past decade, but a new window has opened. Ooh, all of a sudden there's a change. Interesting. So there was tension between the Turks and the Americans because the Turks decided to buy S-400s from the Russians. And that was Turkey telling the Americans, listen, America, we have you by the balls. If you piss us off enough, we're going to go with the Russians. And they bought S-400s from the Russians. And that was a way of showing independence, I think. That was a way of Turkey expressing its independence. Can you give us a link to the article? Which article? This one? Or... But you see, under Trump, you will see America deepening its ties, or really, I should say, just renewing and refreshing, I think refreshing is a better word, refreshing its ties with Turkey because of Russia. They want to use the Turks as a proxy against the Russians. And they also want to make sure that they have the Dardanelles. They want that access from the Black Sea into the Mediterranean. I know I keep repeating that, but it's so important. It's so central to the discussion on America's alliance with Turkey. U.S. anti-ISIS operations exasperated the top threat to Turkish security. So the Americans were working with the YPG. YPG is an enemy of Turkey. It's the biggest enemy of Turkey in Syria. And so the Turks hate the fact that the Americans have worked with the Kurds. But are the Americans going to abandon the Kurds? That's the question. Well, when Trump was president, he abandoned the Kurds. He did. He abandoned them. Why? To please the Turks. Do you see what I'm talking about here? Do you guys see what I mean by America throwing people under the bus? Meanwhile, Turkish anti-YPG operations threaten to destabilize tenuous security conditions in areas where U.S. forces operate. So it says here, many in Israel considered Assad the proverbial known devil. All right, it's about the devil you know, not the devil you don't know. And it's better to be, I hate using the word devil, but it's better to be around the enemy that you know as opposed to the enemy that you don't know. Because with the enemy that you know, you can predict what he's going to do. Signs of U.S. decline? Yeah, I agree. So it says here, many in Israel considered Assad the proverbial known devil, preferring his regime, or at least a fractured state, not under opposition control. And it's amazing that enough Israelis understood and still understand that removing Bashar al-Assad was a bad idea. Why in the hell did they do it? That's what I don't understand. It's almost like the devil has possessed Israel to the point where they're just doing things that make no logical sense. It doesn't make sense to remove Bashar al-Assad and then enable a much more dangerous country to fill in the power vacuum. And that dangerous country is Turkey. It just doesn't make any sense. No matter how you look at it, it does not make sense. Because Israel is not going to be able to control Turkey or contain Turkey. Israel was able to contain Assad. So what was the point? Like I said, it's almost like there's a demonic hysteria that has possessed Israel. So it says here, Russia and Iran counted on the prospect of a brutal but loyal dictator in perpetuity. The United States and Europe had reconciled themselves to a long-term compromise of offering palliative care for Syrian refugees, tolerating an Iran-oriented Assad in Damascus, and conducting an anti-jihadist experiment with leftist Kurdish militias in northeast Syria. President-elect Donald Trump, let me raise this up a little bit. President-elect Donald Trump and his pick for National Security Advisor Mike Waltz have indicated that they will not sustain U.S. This is where things get crazy. Have indicated that they will not sustain U.S. military presence in Syria or support a separatist region there, placing an expiration date on the heretofore open-ended subsidy for the YPG. So we could see the Americans abandon their Kurdish allies. We saw this with Trump's first term. We could see America just throw the Kurds under the bus for the sake of pleasing the Turks. Trump is very pro-Turkey. That's pretty obvious. The Biden administration's Middle East team has acknowledged that a managed transition away from YPG control over sensitive areas in northern Syria is the best way ahead. What? So the Biden administration is agreeing here? Okay, this is, again, it's like what one China man once said. In America, foreign policy does not change. Political parties change, but foreign policy does not change. And I think we're kind of seeing that here. It says, let's read that again. This is very interesting. The Biden administration's Middle East team has acknowledged that a managed transition away from the YPG control over sensitive areas in northern Syria is the best way ahead. So who's going to replace the YPG? Can you take a guess? I don't want to say the T word. I'm becoming redundant. I'm becoming like a broken record here. I'm going to say it's going to be Turkey, right? Revived Ottoman Empire, right? Persistent protests against YPG control in Arab areas such as Deir ez-Zor and Raqqa demonstrate that local populations prefer unity, with the new transitional government to open-ended de facto autonomy enforced by the YPG and backed by U.S. air power. The second factor has decisively changed, and it seems likely that the reunification of these areas with Damascus and the withdrawal, key word here, withdrawal of U.S. troops will soon follow. So the Americans have been providing support for the YPG. They have provided air support for the YPG. And the Americans are saying, okay, Kurds, got a new master now, Turkey. When they say they want to reunify Syria under Damascus, that means Istanbul. That means Ankara. That's what that means. Because to allow Syria to be completely under the control of HTS means Syria being under the control of Turkey. That's the bottom line. The end of Iranian hegemony and Russian guardianship. That's what this is about. It's about keeping the Russians out. That's the whole purpose of NATO. They made that very clear. The purpose of NATO, and this was made clear when NATO was first created, the purpose of NATO is to keep the Russians out and the Germans weak. That's the purpose of NATO. But it looks like the Americans, while they still want to keep the Russians out, they want to strengthen the Germans. But I think the Americans have this idea in their heads that, yeah, we will greenlight the Germans to revive their military strength, but we are going to contain them. Will the Americans be able to contain the Germans? That's the question. And I think perhaps the Americans have this idea in their head that, yeah, we're going to give the green light to the Turks to empower themselves and to take territory, but we can contain them. And you see, this is the big delusion of a lot of political leaders and political parties. They create monsters, and then they think that they can contain the monster. You can see this, for example, in the earlier support for Adolf Hitler. You had people in the United States who supported Adolf Hitler, people in Great Britain who supported Adolf Hitler. You had people within Germany who were huge fans of Adolf Hitler. And if you look at the elites who were supporting Hitler, they thought, yeah, we'll support Hitler. If you look at people like, who is it? Von Papas or whatever his name was. If you look at the elites who were backing Hitler, sure, they supported Hitler, but they thought that Hitler was controllable. And they were wrong. So this is the big delusion that a lot of political parties and politicians have. They think, well, we'll create a monster, or we will enable a monster, but we can control the monster. And that just doesn't work that way. So it says here that the end of Iranian hegemony and Russian guardianship in Damascus has amplified Turkey's weight as a diplomatic, security, and economic partner for the new Syria. There is genuine gratitude among millions of Syrians for the role Ankara played in ending the Assad nightmare. I'm not fully convinced of that. Millions of Syrians now have done business in Turkey and learned the language and culture. They provide a natural constituency for economic integration and joint ventures. This is all just Turkey expanding its economic hegemony. That's what this is. Projects in the fields of energy and transport are already in the works. Turkish military and intelligence services, having previously trained and built institutional capacity in dozens of countries, will almost certainly reprise that role for the new Syria's security sector. Ankara has made clear that it does not seek to replace. Oh, this is weird. Ankara has made clear that it does not seek to replace Tehran's dominion of Syria. I'm not sure if I believe that, though, and has communicated to Gulf partners that the country that can only rebuild with strong Arab support as well as Ankara's assistance. With the end of the past decade's status quo, the counter-alignment of U.S. and Turkish policy on Syria may and should come to an end. And you see this is the who wrote this? The Atlantic Council. They're a big NATO mouthpiece. This is you're reading pure NATO propaganda here. But you can learn from propaganda. Just because something is propaganda doesn't mean it's false. People say, "Oh, you're reading Russian propaganda." Russian propaganda can be true, right? It's not all bullshit. Just like American propaganda. So this is American propaganda, but it reflects what America really thinks. So with the end of the past decade status quo, the counter-alignment of U.S. and Turkish policy on Syria may and should come to an end. So counter-alignment. So it's basically saying all the tensions that were between the United States and Turkey in the past should really just subside, right? It should all just come to an end. Now the Allies' long-term interests overlap on quite a few matters related to Syria. Those interests include establishing Syria's stability and security, preventing ISIS's resurgence, fostering inclusive and effective governance. That means allowing Turkey to rule Syria, returning displaced people, stopping regional Captagon trafficking, and ending the use of Syrian territory as a military or terror threat to Israel. Oh my gosh. And ending the use of Syrian territory as a military or terror threat to Israel? What do you think Turkey's doing? So Iran was using Syria as a threat to Israel, and now Turkey's going to use Syria as a threat to Israel. So which one is worse? Turkey is a bigger, meaner dog than Iran. So they said, well, Iran is using Syria as a bridge to arm Hezbollah. Okay, so you got rid of Iran, which was being contained by the Israelis and even by the Syrian government under Bashar al-Assad. You got rid of Bashar al-Assad, you got rid of the eye doctor, and so what do you have now? What do you have? You have a Turkish monster right next door, and they're going to use Syria as what? They're going to use Syria as a base of operations from which to eventually go to war against Israel. These shared interests comport well with the agenda of the incoming Trump administration. Ooh, interesting. Trump is very pro-Turkey. Trump's priorities include promoting U.S. business and trade deals overseas, bringing an end to wars in the Middle East, deterring Iranian aggression and nuclearization in the region. This is the reason why Israel signed the deal, by the way, because the Israelis know that the Trump administration is going to push for normalization between the Arabs and Israel. And as I've said 50 times already, Israel wants to form a security pact against Iran. And fostering normalization between Israel and its neighbors. The new paradigm in Syria means that Turkey is a crucial contributor to realizing each of these, and that U.S.-Turkey cooperation is essential for foreign policy success. Trump has assessed Turkey as the key player in Syria in recent remarks, a good sign that such cooperation can emerge. Frosty relations between Jerusalem and Ankara may require a helping hand from Washington, for which there is precedent. There are signs the Turks understand the need to reach an acceptable modus vivendi with Israel in order for Syria to experience stability and peace moving forward. Okay. There's not going to be peace in the future, everybody. That's the bottom line. There's going to be peace temporarily, but eventually there's going to be a clash between the Turks and the Israelis. And what's going to start that clash? Well, it could be more Israeli aggression against the Palestinians. That's a possibility. It could be over territory in Syria. It could be both. We have yet to see. But what I do know is that the future is bleak for Israel. And as I said in my last video, Israel is digging its own grave. That's just the bottom line.